Ben, welcome to the show.
Hello, man. Nice to have. Nice. Thanks for having me. Even.
Yeah, of course. I have been watching your work for a while. I'm interested to chat with you. I know we obviously will have our disagreements on the political and economic aspects of it, but I think in terms of what you're building with LNbits and what you're doing in terms of hardware hacking and software around the community, I'm definitely a fan. So interested to chat with you and chat a bit more about LNbits and perhaps give the listeners also a chance to hear from your perspective, like what is this project and some of the stuff you're building. So, do you want to just give us a bit of a background on yourself in terms of like all the hardware hacking and software and stuff that you're working on with Bitcoin?
Yeah, there seemed to be when I started actively developing things and trying to make things and contribute back into the Bitcoin ecosystem. There seemed to be a lack of a kind of maker space in Bitcoin. People were experimenting with Raspberry Pis and putting full nodes in Raspberry Pis, but they weren't using microcontrollers for smaller devices. So I went to one of the first Lightning Hack Day by Fulmo, when the Lightning Network had more or less just launched. And there was a great project there, which was a sweet machine, had a full node in it. And there was a QR code. And if you scanned the QR code, it would take you to a website where you could select some sweets, and then it would pay an invoice, and then it would spit the sweets out of the sweet machine. At that point, there was still this kind of idea that with the Lightning Network, everything would have a node in. That was kind of something which would happen. But then people kind of started to realize that obviously if you have an on-chain transaction for opening channels, it all becomes quite expensive. And that's probably not if you've got sweet machines or arcade machines or, secondary devices, it makes more sense to have just a microcontroller in there, which can just request an invoice from a node, display the invoice, check to see if it's been paid, and then turn whatever on, whether it be the sweet machine or the arcade machine, to activate a credit or something. So that was something I realized I could. I didn't have the skill set to be able to do it, but because before that period, I was a teacher, and I taught some electronics with my kids who I used to teach. So I had like a very rudimentary understanding of electronics, and I played around with a little bit with some Arduino type devices. So I did a little bit of research, found a great little microcontroller, the SP32, and then thought, okay, so I'm going to do a bunch of projects and just base them off this microcontroller, keep it as simple as possible. And the first thing which I tried to create was the sweet machine. And at that point, I had to have a little e-paper display, so I could display a QR code, and then somebody would pay it. Then it could check to see if the invoice had been paid, and then it could turn on a relay and then spit out the sweets. Then from there, I realized that I could plug in a keypad into the microcontroller, and then I could input an amount and request an invoice. And then I was like, okay, there's a point of sale. Great, cool. So it was like the first sort of point of sale I made. I really liked these little e-paper screens as well at that point. But then there was a couple of hang-ups. It was like, well, I don't really want to have an e-paper screen. I want to have a static QR code. So as soon as you start actually building and actively developing for a technology, you might hit some roadblocks, and then you can be more or less guaranteed other people are going to hit those roadblocks. So after the point of sale, the project I was working on was an ATM, and the ATM needs the ability to be able to spend my funds because it's going to pay someone out some money. And at that point, nodes and custodial services like OpenNode or LNPay or and nodes like LND and C Lightning, you couldn't have multiple accounts. You had one account with an admin key, which meant that if you had any service or hardware which was paying out funds, it would effectively have your admin key. So if someone could get the admin key, they could steal your money. So I wanted a way of being able to split up and my funds into lots of little accounts, which would all have their own API keys. So that was another thing which was needed. And then also, a problem which I was having was every project I'd make, I'd have to make like 6 different versions of the project, because I wanted people who had an LND node to be able to use it. I wanted people who had a C Lightning node to be able to use it. I wanted people who just wanted to use a custodial service to be able to use it. So, and they all have different APIs. So I'd have to have like an LND version of the POS, a C Lightning version of the POS, Clever version of the POS. So it made sense to have a middleware piece of software where I could connect to funding sources and then just reuse that piece of software, and it would just have a standard API. Then I could just develop my point of sale for that standard API, and it wouldn't matter what the funding source was underneath. So that was another pain point which I was starting to feel actually actively tinkering away and developing. This was all taking ages, by the way, because I was learning on the job, and I hadn't programmed really before.
Right. And
So
this
I
is
think
over the process of years, right? Because you would, I mean, if we're talking Lightning Hack Day, that was what, 2018? Or there were
yeah,
multiple hack days, to be clear.
yeah,
But
yeah.
some of those early ones, they were, and I know the German Lightning community is quite a strong scene. And so they had a lot of Lightning Hack Days. And I know you were involved, and I know you've obviously been around the scene at various conferences and various events. And often being participating in things like, or leading a workshop on, say, a hack table where you're teaching people, okay, here's how you use these different pieces of commodity hardware to create some kind of Bitcoin project or a Lightning project. And so I think it's really fascinating to see the evolution of that over time. And now we're coming to this LNbits. So for listeners, just to understand, so maybe they're not as familiar, like, what is LNbits?
Well, so I was very slowly leading up to the reason LNbits started to exist. So the and it will all make sense. It's not just me ranting about hardware, but the
Yeah,
one of the
sure.
points of sale in Berlin in room 76, and it's a very good point actually, that without the Lightning Hack Days, none of this stuff would exist, and without the support and the access to great minds, people like Stephan Livera of Spectre Wallet. He was really
Spectre.
helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, every time I'd see him at a conference, I'd have a bunch of questions for him. He'd help me along a little bit. And the workshops are kind of off the back of that, in that you kind of feel that they were able to make such huge impact on the stuff I was building. So am I able to kind of encourage people to also, as soon as you teach people how to actually actively build on these little hardware devices, they start making cool things. They start making hardware wallets and points of sale and everything. Anyway, so we had one of these points of sale, and it was an M5 stack, actually, which was one of these. This was like an off-the-shelf product by this company called M5, but it's an ESP32 inside there. That was running in the iconic Bitcoin bar room 77, and it was doing well. It was doing lots of payments. And Jörg Platzer, the owner, one of his issues was he didn't know what payments going into his node were for drinks and what were other payments. And he's a cypherpunk, old school cypherpunk, pre-Bitcoin, crypto anarchist cypherpunk, but he was like, he had to pay his taxes. So he needed like an export to CSV feature as well, and is connected somehow to this little point of sale, connected to this middleware, where I also wanted different accounts. So then all of those ideas kind of came together. And I hung out a lot with Tim Bootstrap Bandit as well, of LNpay. And we chatted a lot, and I loved LNpay, and we exchanged a lot of great ideas. And it just all came together to be this sort of free and open source custodial thing. And then there's this other idea of, if you want to attack regulation, one of the best ways to do it is make running things easier. So it's like when the original cypherpunks were attacking some of the crypto regulation at that time, they just made running that software easier for people, and then more people could run it, and it was easier to make mockery of the laws, the archaic laws around it. So the idea was, if you could run like a piece of software, and you could be, the Uncle Jim model for your friend's family or whatever, or the whole world, if it made it easy for you to run your own little open node, would that be more effective at kind of, attacking or making it easier to bypass regulations when it comes to running, money transfer or custodial services? So that was another idea. So anyway, so it all came together, and then I think Christian Russo was actually over visiting off Raspberry Blitz project. And we were talking about it, and I think I was like, "Oh yeah, I got this. I really want to make this thing, and I might write it in PHP." And he was like, "No." And I said, "If I make it, can we get it on the Raspberry Blitz?" And he was like, "Yeah, but you can't make it in PHP if you want it on the Raspberry Blitz, I'm afraid. So how about Python?" So I'm like, "Okay, Python." So I'm looking at Python APIs, and I find Flask, which is a really small API, backend API, and then I start developing it. I think it's like HTML and like the Bootstrap CSS library thing. And it's very clunky and ugly, but it works. Like, I have this middle layer software where I can have multiple accounts, and I can connect to any funding source, and then I can just develop for this middle layer software, which is great. And then I had a little tab in there called extensions, which, so the other idea was, a lot of us actively developing and tinkering around with this new software, we would make these little projects. Like, I made like the first LNURL withdraw faucet, online, the Sinclair faucet, and that was very popular. People wanted me to open source it, but it was just trash in the back. And it was, every time someone would build one of these little projects, they would be replicating a lot of work. They would be connecting to a node, requesting invoices, checking if the invoice is being paid, blah, blah, blah. So it also made sense as a development tool in the stack you could include this thing in and it would take all that heavy lifting out and you could just build those little slithers of functionality. And actually, why not have those slithers of functionality in the software itself as extensions? Kind of like a WordPress type thing where you can extend it in a direction which is relevant to you, your node in a direction which is relevant to you. So that project was clunky, and I think I put a bounty out to have it just sort of audited and refactored. And Fiatjaf and Eneco, Ilera, they got in contact about that. And then when they started working, this is why I love bounties, because when you put out a bounty, someone will be like, oh, great, I get to work on some software related to Bitcoin, and I get to help build something cool, and I get paid as well. And then once that's happened, they know the software and they think of things which they want to build themselves on the software, and they were just like stuck to it. Then, so they would have been constant contributors, and I think Fiatjaf's probably the primary contributor if you look at all the commits. So then came a big refactor headed by Ilera, where we switched to Quasar, the front end Quasar, which is a very nice. If you want to develop a piece of software, it's a very nice way to make a piece of software look nice. It's like a CSS view library which you can use, framework, and then it looked good. It looked legit, and it'd also been refactored, and it worked pretty well. But it couldn't do sort of async stuff. So then Fiatjaf came in and he brought in Quark, which is this async version of Flask, and then it started to get a bit more fancy in the back end. So we could like have extensions like listening for when invoices are being paid, and then get it to do a thing. And it's great. And it as a tool built for my own needs, I use it. If I'm building like a point of sale, I'll use LNbits because it's easier. And I think a lot of other people, when you build something for yourself, there's always a lot of other people out there who are also like you. And because of that, we've built up a great community of users. I think our Telegram group has like 1,000 users in it, and they're so supportive as well. Like you'll have someone coming in who's like starting their LNbits journey, and they'll have a few questions, and the same people will answer the same questions again and again and again, and they don't care. That it's that idea of encouraging people to experiment with the software, experiment with the project, and it just has. You see that with all the successful free and open source projects. You can have like the greatest free and open source software out there, but if you're kind of mean and toxic, like no one's gonna, and then standoffish with people when they come and ask you dumb questions, then no one's going to use your stuff. Whereas if you just embrace the community and build the community, you find those sorts of projects like the BTC Pay server projects, they do very well because you just get all this support, this supportive network for future users, and then those users then go on to become supportive themselves of other people too. They have to pass.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I think it's a really cool tool. I was playing around with it, so I guess let me just rewind just to make sure our listeners are all following along. Not everyone's like into the technical details of it.
Shall I give you the stamp? Okay, so LNbits is a free and open source wallet account system, which includes extensions, so you can extend your node in any direction. So you can install it on your node. It's kind of like WordPress for your node. You have a simple wallet account system where you can have multiple accounts, multiple wallets, multiple users. So you can be your Uncle Jim, custodian for friends, family. But we also have these extensions where you can make use of other people's work, and you can extend that node in any direction which is relevant to you. So if you're a content creator, you can have QR codes in your videos when you do your YouTube videos. If you're a shop, an online shop, you can have some commerce tools, and there's like WooCommerce integrations. And if you're a cafe, then you have like a point of sale, and we have like a loop out extension, which I'm very excited about for those cafe and bar owners who just want to accumulate Bitcoin and put it on a hardware wallet somewhere. So yeah, we have extensions which you'll basically install LNbits, just the core software, and then currently we're packaging all the extensions in with it because there's only like 30. But soon they will be extrapolated out. So you install LNbits software, it will be very much just like WordPress. Search for a plugin, go get it, install it, and then boom, you've got all this extra functionality which will be relevant for you.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I think it's really cool. And I was looking, obviously researching a bit, and I've seen you've got it available on Raspberry Blitz and Umbrel as well. So this is like an easy install thing that you can run it off, where it's running off your own node, but then you can, as you were saying, be the Uncle Jim for your family or your friends. Or let's say you're running a cafe and you want to run the node for the cafe, and you can run your own little LNbits and have a little POS system. And we can get into all the different extensions and things like that. But I'm also just curious as well, because how has your journey been like trying to support some of the different implementations? As I see, you have LND from Lightning Labs and Core Lightning from Blockstream as well. And so was that difficult to build in the support for that, or was that just, all as part of your own journey? You were already supporting these things anyway?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we'd already like interacted with their APIs and RPCs and whatever else. Um, and actually, what LNbits does is quite dumb, really. I mean, it goes and gets an invoice and checks see if an invoice is being paid, and then also if it's a stream of payments which you can connect to, some WebSocket or something, then it will connect to that, and then just listen to invoices and see if they're relevant to the LNbits install. So each connection is actually just a single Python file, and it's just a collection of functions, and they're all the same functions. If you go into like core LNbits core wallets, you'll see that there's just a bunch of funding sources there. And it's great because we had like Eclair support recently, and then Cliche as well, which I don't know if you played around much with the hosted channel stuff, but Cliche is kind of like a fork of the thing they're using in Simple Bitcoin Wallet in order for you to have instant inbound liquidity. These hosted channel things, Cliche runs. You can build these hosted channels very quickly. So it basically means that soon we should have an LNbits install where it's like one-click install LNbits, and then you have this node underneath. And then have instant inbound liquidity, and then in such a way where we're not custodians of funds. So it becomes like quite exciting. So yeah, every time there's a new funding source for Lightning, you can easily just implement it and add it.
Fantastic. Yeah, that's really cool to see. And I just think it's such a cool thing because it's like, as I was looking through, I saw there were all these different extensions. There was even a Satoshi dice built into LNbits, which is interesting,
Yeah,
right?
that's what
Because
I
it's
made.
very
Yeah.
reminiscent, right? For people who were, around Bitcoin in like 2011, 2012, 2013, many people had that memory of playing Satoshi dice where you like send a small amount of sats to a Bitcoin address and then you receive some back. And there was like a known probability of winning or losing. And so I played around. I saw on the demo version, you've got that there. I thought that was it was just really cool to see that like what was old is new again, and we're doing it using Lightning now, and now anyone can make their own Lightning version of Satoshi Dice. So I thought that was really cool.
Well,
So yeah,
all of these extensions, we kind of just rolled them out quickly because we wanted to show, look, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this, and I think it's just powerful to have, like, when you install it, you have a load of extensions, but they can all be worked into. And one of the things I really want to add to Satoshi Dice is the provably fair stuff, which I think we could add, where you get like a hash thing of before you actually pay, and or some proof. I don't know how it works, but I know that this provably fair thing exists, and I know that it is possible, speaking to my clever mates, to be able to build that into Satoshi Dice. So that's something I really want to add, because then you can, the way it works is an LNUR pay, and if you win, you get an LNUR withdraw. So an LNUR pay, you can just have a static QR code you send payments to, and you get this link back, which is your winnings. So you could print one of these, like a high roller one of these QRs out, and then stick it in Paddington train station and see if any high roller Bitcoiners come along and scan that QR code, and they could potentially win tens of thousands of Satoshis or hundreds of thousands of Satoshis. And you could do it in such a way where it is provably fair. And I think that's kind of exciting. I don't like gambling. I really don't like gambling at all. But I think that part of the problem with gambling is making gambling software is so much fun. So there's always these solutions for being built by people who don't particularly like
yeah.
gambling, but they like making the software for it.
Yeah, and I think it's just really cool because there's so many different possible applications, right? And so for some listeners who maybe they're not as into the technical aspects of it, or maybe they haven't explored this as much, there's just so many possible applications. It's hard to even explain for people because you've got like vouchers, you can have point of sale, you can have all these different things. You can run faucets out of this. So I think it would be good, or you can run paywalls on this. So let's talk through some of these cases so people can understand. Oh, okay. If I was to run my own, say, Raspberry Blitz, I could install LNbits on this. I could set up an instance there, and I could create some different accounts. Let's talk through some of those cases for people. So, do you want to just talk through the faucets? Like, how does that work? How would you make a faucet using LNbits to, let's say, have a QR code that anyone can scan and they can receive?
So, I mean, again, it goes back to, and this is why I love the LNURL stuff, and I love things like hosted channels, because they're developments and solutions which have been built from the ground up, as opposed to protocol top down. So it's very much from the community of users and builders. So I think that's really exciting, and they address real world need and what we want Lightning to, how we want it to work, and then that can inform protocol development. But so early on, like me with my sweet machine and my little e-paper screen, I didn't want to have the e-paper screen. I want a static QR code. And the best way to achieve that is your wallet is just allowed to do a GET request to a server. If it gets an invoice back, it says, do you want to pay this invoice? And then you just say yes. And that's essentially what an LNURL pay is. You can do some more funky stuff, like you can set like limits and stuff, like a min max and blah, blah, blah. But initially, that's basically what it is. So then you can have a static QR code. You can keep just scanning it, and basically your phone is just doing GET requests to a server, just a URL. And if it gets an invoice back, it asks you if you want to pay it. And then LNURL can also work the other way around, in that you can scan a QR code, and then the server will say to you, send back a JSON, just basically saying, send me an invoice between this amount and this amount, and I'll pay it. And then your phone says, do you want to claim these sats? You say yes. And then your wallet is essentially just making an invoice, sending it to the server, and the server's then paying it on your behalf, so you get the funds. For the user, you're scanning a QR code, saying yes, and then you're getting funds, which is great for like an ATM, for example. You just want to put some, for a Lightning ATM, you want to put some coins in, and then you just want to scan a QR code and get the funds. And then there's also other forms of LNURL. There's LNURL channels, so you can easily, I think Bitrefill use those for easily opening channels with nodes. And then there's LNURL auth, which is getting more and more traction, which is a nice way. Actually, I mean, it's not even Lightning related at all. It's just I think you just sign like a message or something, and then you can use that to authorize access, because you can do that from a Lightning wallet. You can, scan with your Lightning wallets and log into different services and whatever on the internet or in real world as well. So it's a very powerful collection, suite of tools. And LNURL is Lightning URL, simply. And the protocol has had a lot of hours put into it. If you go to that protocol repo, so if you Google like GitHub LNURL, you'll get to the protocol repo, and you'll see all the different varieties of LNURL, and then all the different wallets which support it. And those wallets supporting it is often the people who've developed LNURL, such as Fiat Jaff and Hampus, them actually going to those wallets and like helping them PR and get that implemented. Because builders and users, we just wanted it to exist. We wanted, I think, like the Lightning wallet at the time, just wanted an easy way to do channel stuff, I think, and that's why the LNURL channels exist. But for one of the Lightning Hack days, I met George Vasaro, and that was in New York. And we were talking about this. I asked Christian Decker, actually, I said, when are we going to get static QR codes? I don't want to have to keep generating invoices. And he's like, yeah, it's, we know it's important for people. It's the feature everyone requests, but we've got a lot of other things we need to kind of address first. And it's like, okay, so do we sit here and wait for the protocol people to build the things, or do we just build like hacks and ways around it and whatever else they may be valuing those themselves? So I sat down with George Vasaro and we talked about it, and he had an arcade machine which he built, and one of these little microcontrollers, these ESP32s, and then actually hacked together like a demo version, which was cool. So he hacked a Claire wallet, so a Claire wallet would do that GET request, and I think that's probably the first example of an LNURL pay. And it is recorded. It's in the Lightning New York stream as well, so it's quite a nice little bit of history, that is. And whenever I'm with him at a conference, and then people say, "Oh, who are you?" And I'm like, "This is the dude who made the first LNURL pay." Show some respect. But so I forgot where I was going with this. What were we talking about? Oh, the faucets.
Yeah, so,
okay,
yeah.
So the first thing I made was the Sinclair faucet, which was named after Clive Sinclair, the great British inventor. And you could pay some sats. You could select how often you wanted your faucet to spit out, and then how much you wanted to put in, I think, and then how much each time it spat out. So, if you put 1,000 sats in, you could spit out like 100 sats 10 times or something every hour or every set. Then it would show you an invoice. You'd pay the invoice. Then it would just have a page you could share with people, and then they could just pull this faucet every hour. People soon like hacked around and made bots and stuff for it. But that's LNURL withdraw. I always feel is very powerful, like, because you can use it for faucets. So currently there's a guy driving around the US, and I helped him spin up an LNbits, and he's actually doing, it's on TikTok, so I don't really go on TikTok, so I don't really know to look for it. But he's doing like a treasure hunt, so he's getting these little capsules and these little pill things, And then he's making a little LNUR QR code, a withdrawal faucet, and putting inside these pill things. And then he's hiding them all around the US. And he's like traveling all around the US doing this, and then putting it on TikTok. And then he sort of films the location of where it might be. And then people have to go and search for this little tiny pillbox thing. So you can do faucets with it, which is fun for treasure hunts and ATMs and whatever else. But I also think that an LNUR withdrawal can work like a direct debit. You know, if I want to pay Netflix, I can give them like an LNUR withdrawal, and they can just, and with permission to pull funds once a month, and then they can pull funds once a month. With Bitcoin, it's one of those sort of, again, one of those blacklisted topics, the idea of subscription models. Like we think that everything's going to be pay as you go. But I can tell you, like now my Luna node, which I do pay as you go on, has again gone down because again, I haven't gone in and I haven't paid for my my services, which I'm supposed to do every month. So subscription services are still quite useful. But I kind of think the LNUR withdrawal could work like that. The other proposal actually for a direct debit system is I was using LNURL Pay in some way, but that was quite interesting. By the way, if anyone's interested in LNURL, it's a very I think it's a great technology. If you go on Telegram and look for LNURL Mafia, there's a great group where people discuss stuff, and like with the Bolt cards by Danny and the Coin Corn a lot, which uses LNURL Pay, LNURL Withdraw. Yeah, so you give them an LNURL Withdraw, and then they can pull funds from your account. All that sort of stuff is kind of discussed on there, which is great. And it's cool to see, because again, so a couple of years ago, I did an experiment where I got an LNUR withdraw and put it on an NFC tag and then did tap and pay. And when you do tap and pay, a lightning payment, and it's tap and pay, and you want scanning a QR code and doing this with your phone, trying to get that QR code, it's much more like how the technology should work. And it's so fast as well. It's like, it is faster than when you do tap and pay with a traditional legacy bank card,
a credit card or whatever.
Yeah. I don't know why it just feels quicker. Like we think people always complain about Bitcoin and Lightning being this complicated software and system, but actually, if you were to see behind the veil of legacy payments and Visa and all this sort of stuff and all the handshakes which go on with banks and things, now that's complicated. Like we're very simple compared to that. So because of that, I think it works quickly. It was quicker and often. So it made sense to build that into LNbits. So if I have an LNbits install running on my on my my Raspberry Blitz or whatever, or I have it in the VPS connected to my node, I want to be able to make faucets, give them out to people. I want to be able to experiment. I want to have an ATM connected to my LNbits install and get it to display these faucets so people can pull the funds. And as well as that, we've also got LNURL Pay, and then we've got experiments like the Satoshi Dice thing where we're kind of marrying the two. There's also the offline shop one, which is one of Fiat Jaff's, and that's a cool extension. So you can make a list of products, and then it will just generate QR codes, static LNUR pays for those QR codes. And then you don't need to be online, but you also have a word list, right? And then every time a customer comes and pays for something, as a receipt, they get the next word in the word list. And then they can go to the merchant and just say, bunny rabbit or whatever, or, I don't know, antelope. And then then the merchant either has the word list or has memorized the word list and can say, oh, right, okay, that is the next word on the word list. And it's just a way of verifying payments in kind of like a market scenario, for just like a single merchant. But what often happens is that someone will build something and then ideas will just spin off that idea. So off that idea, I came up with the LNPOS thing, which is a hardware point of sale. And because I've got LNbits, I can just make an easy extension, LNURL devices, where I can register. Because basically the way it works is you have an offline point of sale. The point of sale itself generates a 4-digit PIN when you input an amount and press the hashtag. It encrypts the 4-digit PIN. Stephan Livera helped here a lot, by the way, making some great crypto stuff. It encrypts the 4-digit PIN, puts it inside the LNURL Pay. So the LNURL Pay is just a URL. So we can, on the end, we can tack on data. So we just tack on some scrambled encrypted data about the PIN and the POS ID. Then once you scan the LNURL Pay to pay the POS, your phone is then doing that GET request to the server, passing over that encrypted data. The server can then, using the POS ID, which is also in that URL, can locate the POS in LNUR devices on LNbits, can get the key, can check to see if the payment has been paid. If it's being paid, it can then decrypt the key, then send the key back as a receipt to the person who's just scanned the QR code. So essentially, you have a POS where you can input an amount, press the hashtag, someone can scan it, and then as a receipt, they get the 4-digit PIN. But a bunch of stuff has happened there. But it means that the POS can be offline, which I think is because I often all our hardware is pretty cheap, so it becomes quite powerful in like countries which are adopting Bitcoin but have limited infrastructure. Someone can walk around accepting Bitcoin payments on a hardware device, could be completely offline, and then can verify that the payments are going through. And there's no way they can get that 4-digit PIN unless they've like hacked that person's server or something. So, but that was a direct result of the offline shop thing. And then also the Bleskomat lot. So the Bleskomat, the Parallel Polis people, we have a Bleskomat extension, so you can easily connect your LNbits to your Bleskomat. And
So just to be clear, just for listeners who don't know, what is a Bleskomat?
A Bleskomat is so there's a bunch of Lightning ATM projects. I suppose there's three. Like this was mine. There was the Fossa, free and open source ATM, and then there was the Lightning ATM, and then there was the Bleskomat built by the Parallel Polis people in Prague, so HCCP. And they, that's where Trezor came from, and they built some great stuff. And the Bleskomat is an ATM, but when you put money in and it gives you that LNUR withdraw, the ATM itself is completely offline. So you can just stick it up anywhere, which is again powerful because you don't need. I can stick it up in a forest somewhere, and somebody could like get some sats. It's also really useful. I don't think because we go to a lot of these conferences and we take our hardware to these conferences, and I never want to underestimate like the amount of impact not having internet at conferences had on developing these things. If you make the points of sale and they require internet, or you can make ATMs that require internet, and then the conference internet is terrible because thousands of people are suddenly on the internet, and you're like, it'd be better if it was offline. So yes, there's all this altruistic building for countries with limited infrastructure, but I do think that it's also off the back somewhat of conferences and their terrible internet. But yeah, the Bleskomat works offline. It's an ATM. It's great, great project, and they have an extension LNbits, so you can easily. Basically, the funds will then be pulled out of a wallet on your LNbits, because then you have that added functionality of being able to limit exposure to funds. The ATM can only have, say, access to £100 worth of funds, and then when those funds run out, you can get notified, and then you can go and you can top it up, or you can put some automated script in there, or whatever. But you have some control over the amount of funds which that ATM has access to. So again, because I think that being offline and a hardware device mixed with VHF's offline shop idea, that kind of turned into the LNPOS, 4-digit PIN idea. And again, this is why these Telegram groups are good. I think I dropped that in the LNURL Mafia group as just to feel it out. I was like, I've got this idea. We could do this. And then, if you have the right people, if you have someone like Hampus turn around and say, oh, yeah, that's cool, then you're like, okay, I should probably build that thing.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love hearing about these because I think there's so many uses, and there's all these different aspects of the Bitcoin and Lightning world that are interacting. And so I think it's really cool to see. And so this could also be useful, even just the standard, with LNbits, just the standard POS, right? Let's say you're a cafe owner and it's got a user manager in there. So you can, I guess the idea is the cafe owner might delegate to staff certain responsibilities, right?
Well, so if you, probably for the staff owner, if they had their own LNbits account, they would just let the people working in the cafe open accounts. So user manager is actually more designed for someone using LNbits in their stack. So we have a couple of power users, who have like the Lightning tip bot that runs on Telegram, that runs on LNbits, and it's being able to use the user manager and have LNbits just divide up accounts for users and wallets and all this stuff, and then like Lightning tip bot can make use of all the extensions in LNbits, so it could create faucet links. It can do all the things because it's all these things built into LNbits have APIs. So with a lightweight piece of software, incredibly, you can put into your software stack. It's very powerful. So user manager is really beneficial for that. But so I think it's very important to think of payment journeys, and we have in different countries, you have different payment journeys, different use requirements of something like LNbits of this sort of software. But there's a cafe near me, and I've told the story a bunch of times, but it's true. Like, there's a cafe near me. The guy who has the cafe is receptive to Bitcoin, likes Bitcoin, has some Bitcoin. I haven't yet told him the things I'm building because it's just not ready. Like, what I want for the experience is so he has an we can use my LNbits, in fact. So he uses my LNbits installed, okay? he sets up a TPOS, which is the point of sale extension on LNbits. There was a great PR actually recently by Lee Reisman, and in that he's added the ability to add tips as well, which is absolutely fantastic. So so the cafe owner can have a wallet on my LNbits, a user account on my LNbits, a wallet. He can have two wallets. He can have a wallet for the cafe, he can have a wallet for tips, and then you can use this software point of sale, and you can use it on your phone. It's fully phone responsive, and then the one you're using on your phone is completely air gapped from the actual LNbits. So there's no way they can get back to any wallet details from this phone. It hasn't got any keys or anything in it. There's like an extra hop. He can have in his cafe, you can have a QR code and just say, if anyone wants to, if Ben comes in and wants to pay in Bitcoin, scan this QR code with your phone, and you have a point of sale. It's denominated in their local fiat currency for the people working in the cafe in GBP. So they input an amount, and then it generates a QR code. It asks me if I want a tip, and I tip, and then it generates a QR code. When the payment happens, it splits between those two wallets. Now, that cafe owner, the question will be, when he's accumulated, when I go in there, I drink coffee in there most days. So when he's accumulated hundreds of thousands of sats worth of Bitcoin from me buying coffees, will be, now what can I do with these sats? And it's like, okay, well, we're not in a circular economy. There's not that much you can do with your life. Go pay for some VPS or some, go get a server somewhere or a VPN, or sorry. There's not that much you can do with this Lightning stuff. What he wants to do is he wants it as a way of accumulating some Bitcoin, right? So now we have the boltz.exchange extension, which DNI has been working on. It's so cool. And you can get it to listen to a wallet. So when a wallet has, say, £100 in it, the boltz.exchange extension will take the £100, right? And then it will loop out to an on-chain address. So you just need to give it an on-chain address. Now, even better than that, is we have the on-chain extension in LNbits. So you can give that an XPub. So actually what can happen is the on-chain extension can generate a fresh address, and then every £100 it can loop out to that fresh address, right? And even better than that, we have a Vlad Stan, another one of our contributors. I worked with him ages ago because I had the Bowser hardware wallet, which I built. I worked with him ages ago to come up with the Bowser 2, but we never quite made it. And then recently we got together, and he's, I've got the hardware into his hands, and now he's tinkering away. And we've built an £8 hardware wallet, which we can connect to with web. So just connect to with a USB, connect to LNbits. This has a private key on. It can sign a PSBT. It can do all that stuff. So the cafe owner, if he wants a hardware wallet, if he wants, he could just give you an address from Kraken, and you could just send the funds to Kraken, right? But if he wants a hardware wallet to accumulate those funds on, this is cheap enough for me to just be able to give him. I know that's not the greatest security advice, but this is his onboarding journey, right? And in that onboarding journey, I can give him this hardware wallet, show him how it works. Says, right, you're going to accumulate Bitcoin from me buying coffees. It's going to go into this hardware wallet, and then this is how you spend the funds from that hardware wallet. And the on-chain wallet extension is in LNbits is absolutely fantastic. It works so well. Like when you make a payment, all fees, everything's automated, but then just you toggle a switch, and then you'd have a nice slider, and you can select the fee you want to pay. And you can also do coin selection as well. So you just click another switch, and you can randomize it, and it's so good. Vladstan worked on Bitcoin JS in the past, so he knows his stuff on chain. So
yeah.
That is, I think, as a collection of tools for that cafe owner. Then when those things are built, which is very shortly, because we have the hardware wallet, we have the point of sale with tips. The thing we're waiting on now is just that boltz.exchange extension to pass a bunch of tests. DNI's this has also been great. We've been building a lot of tests into LNbits, and he's building a great testing suite for his own extension. So he's very pedantic, which is good, I suppose, because you're dealing with bigger quantities of funds. But that collection of extensions, I can set the cafe owner up with that. He can use my LNbits. I can charge him like a 2% transaction fee for using my LNbits, or more, maybe 5% transaction fee. But I can say to him, look, if you don't want me to charge this transaction fee, then I can help you set up an LNbits. And then hopefully by that time, we'll have something like the cliche wallet thing where we could do like hosted channels, so he doesn't have to worry about, setting up channels, balancing channels so much. We can do it through these hosted channels and kind of automate that process a little bit, and then add some on-chain channels as well, some normal Lightning channels as well into it. So you have like this onboarding journey where, and then his risk profile for using my service is obviously the fee I'll charge per transaction, but then also it's like 100 quid, which is going into that wallet. That's the risk for using a custodial solution. And then I think this is something very interesting because, again, going back to something we said earlier on, there was this idea that Lightning nodes would be easier to use and channels would be easier to use, and they're not. They're quite hard and still quite expensive. That will get better with channel factories and autopilot stuff, so I don't want to FUD too much. But when you have countries adopting Bitcoin and they have limited resources, some of these things become nice ways for some merchant in El Salvador who's on subsistence wage, a couple £100 a month, and they when they don't mind using a custodial service, but they don't want to put too many funds on there for too long, particularly if it's a service just run locally and there's not that much accountability. But what they can do is they can use extensions like the on-chain swap one to just push those funds out and put them somewhere secure. Another extension which does it in a Lightning way is we have Scrub, and Scrub, semi-custodial remittance, something Bitcoin. I haven't come up with the acronym yet, but we've got the name Scrub because you like the name Scrub. And what that does is you give it an LN address. So you could just generate an LN address in a more reputable, custodial wallet, because that's what they got to use because they can't afford to run their own node. And then payments from this, sketchy LNbits install run by some local kid, every $10 or whatever, or
Right.
less
Every now and then it flushes out or sweeps out.
Or constantly, actually, you can just constantly just be a semi-custodial thing, so you can access the point of sale and LNbits, but when a payment comes in, you'll just push it across to your wallet there. So that sort of stuff, addressing custodianship more pragmatically, and not just saying, well, everybody should run their own nodes. It's like, okay, cool. Ideally, yes, and we will get there. But for now, how do we build the best possible payment service for people? How do we build the best form of custodianship where there is some accountability, like hosted channels? So yeah, it's a very interesting area to be working, and that is a different payment experience to the cafe owner in the UK or Europe or something, because they have that circular economy.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's different challenges to walk through here. So in this example, let's say it's a cafe owner. They are probably thinking, well, hang on, how do I get that into fiat? Because I need some fiat to pay my business expenses. I've got to pay staff. I've got to pay this, that, and the other. And so I guess this is about smoothing that process to make it certain parts of it automated or certain parts of it at least built into a way that's a little bit easier. I know one other example that I saw recently, and I think people were sharing this as well, is this idea of automated or recurring payments to a Lightning address. And so you could, like, hypothetically, let's say the cafe owner is running LNbits and he wants to pay some of his staff to their Lightning address. He could sort of set up a way to automated pay the staff a certain amount every 2 weeks, as an example.
Oh well, we had one of the extensions we had again off the back. So we had Crypto Graffiti. He did a live stream and he had a QR code on the screen. What was cool about this, Jeff made this extension just for this. Actually collaborated with Crypto Graffiti to make this extension, and had an LN Pay on the screen. What's cool about it is when you paid a certain amount, you could get a link for the song, so you could download the song. But then also the payment was split from I think like 10% to the DJ and then 90% to the producer of the song.
Yeah.
And we all got excited by the split payments idea. So we have a split payments extension in LNbits where you can just say to a wallet, like, if this wallet gets funds in, split it between this wallet, and this wallet. And then, as you said at the very beginning of your show, I have certain, like, I like the idea of cooperatives, for example, and the idea of collaborative enterprises. So the idea of some little coffee shop being able to spin up a group of friends, 3 or 4 friends, and they say, okay, well, you get X%, you get X%, you get X%, and they kind of work it out themselves, and then X% goes towards the upkeep of the service and costs or whatever. And then every time at point of sale, every time a payment is made, it's then split across those different participants in that cooperative. And then I think, well, what happens if you have like a tree of splits? So I go buy a laptop from the shop, and when I make that payment, because we're not beholden to weird legacy Visa networks, which have limitations when it comes to transactions, whatever, we could have like payment splitting for departments. So it goes to distribution, manufacturing, marketing, and then from there it then splits there, and the cleaner on the shop floor is getting these sats dribbling into their phone, and then the sats stop dribbling in, all the millisats stop dribbling in from all these laptops which are being sold, and then that cleaner then becomes a bit more engaged in why has it stopped. Well, okay, well we cut down the percentage for the marketing team, or sales. And it's like, okay, well, maybe we should give them more. And you give them more, And then you have the problem of there's not enough in manufacturing to keep up with the demand and blah, blah, blah. So you get these participants in this cooperative all becoming a bit more engaged. That's my own personal interest in that particular idea of splitting payments. I think it could radicalize and radically change production in some scenarios. And I think Lightning can allow that sort of stuff. And it becomes interesting. And it's competing in a
It's
free market, so you
reminiscent
can't.
also with podcasting 2.0 as well. This idea of if you're using, say, Breeze or Fountain, and people are doing the podcasting 2.0, and they're having a certain split go to the host and a certain split going
Wow,
to
so
project.
split payments and the crypto graffiti thing came first, and Adam Curry, he was a huge fan of LNbits, and he did this amazing shout out on some podcast where he's explaining his Bitcoin journey and how he installed Raspberry Blitz, and then he did a one-click install of LNbits, and he's like, "Holy shit! Look at all the things you could do with this LNbits!" And then he came into our LNbits channel. I didn't know who he was, and said, "I'm interested in this podcasting thing," and I was he was talking about RSS feeds, and I was like, it didn't really like tickle my fancy, but I wish I'd like engaged more with him at the time. But that is an extension I really want to build. I was talking to Anita Posh about it actually, where you can upload your podcast to your LNbits install and create that RSS feed, the RSS 2.0, whatever is it RSS 2.0 feed, and
Podcasting
then
2.0, yeah.
podcasting 2.0, create that RSS feed, and then people can subscribe to it, and then you can do it through LNbits. And then have the funds go to an LNbits wallet. I need to look into it, but I think that would make a cool extension for people. If they've got LNbits installed and they're doing podcasting, they might as well make a. I'm not sure whether it will work. If you have any feedback on that concept, would that work?
Maybe. I think it's early days with all of this stuff. I think it's hard to sort of figure out exactly where like how much demand is there going to be, but I'm curious to see where it goes, right? Like to see what happens with all the podcasting 2.0 stuff. Like I have podcasting 2.0 stuff. I've played around with it obviously. So yeah, I just think
I guess
it's early.
Yeah, it's like a lot of these things, like and this is often the complaint and the thing we complain about, sort of like the LNUR Mafia group. A bunch of us, like Boomy and me, building something, we'll be like, what we really want, like with an LNUR Pay, for example, when you make an LNUR Pay, there's no real way for what was it? So the idea was if you're doing WebLN, and then you pay in a browser, you then want the browser to be able to check the payment and deliver something, I think, or something like that. There was something which LNUR Pay couldn't do. And both me and Boomy had the same issue. And we were like, it'd be nice if you could just have like a LNUR Pay verify thing where it could just like check to make sure the payment's gone through. And then there's this kind of kickback and people are like, well, no, but no one wants to build things with it. Or like LNUR Pay, one of the functions you could do, and you could put in a comment in the payment. And a few wallets adopted it, but it wasn't very well adopted. And then support for it kind of waned, and it's not really supported now as much as we'd hope. Well, actually, no, I tell a lie, it is more supported now. But anyway, there was a period where it wasn't very well supported, and a bunch of us were like, actually, this should be supported. And it's like, well, what tools use it? And it's like, well, none currently. But if you build the ability to make the thing, then people will build things on top of it. So it's kind of like the podcasting 2.0 thing. If we build an extension, LNbits, to make it a little bit easier to do podcasting 2.0, who knows? Like someone might use that in some weird and creative way, which may not be related to podcasting, marrying it with some other extension. But I think you got to like build the tools first, and then give people the tools so they could easily build the things, and then people be creative and build interesting things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like you. Yeah, I'll just see where it goes, but try and get the tools into the hands.
Another area I'm curious as well, just to get your views on that, is just paywalls. So even just people who want to, let's say they want to do a website and use LNbits as the underlying way of running a paywall. Can you just talk through that case? How would that work? What does that look like today?
Yeah, I think maybe I think I might have spoken to you about this in the past, because I've always had an interest in the paywall stuff. I really wanted from the beginning of when I first used Yawls, Alex Bosworth's Yawls, which is a great example of Lightning being used. I just wanted that in WordPress, like a pay to read more button, instead of a read more button. And I put out a couple of bounties actually to try and get this thing created, because I don't know how to do make WordPress plugins, and a couple of people, they made plugins almost there, but they weren't quite what I wanted. But Boomy's actually from Albi. He's made a great plugin for WordPress where you can do, I can't remember what it's called, but if you Google it, And you can pay to read more. You can do that thing where you put this link in an article, and then so you can give them a little snippet. And I just think, when it comes to press, like if I go to the Financial Times, someone sends me a link to an article, some Bitcoin article, some Financial Times article. I go there, and then it has this subscription thing, and I'm thinking, man, like I would overpay to access this article now because I really want to read it. I would pay like 50p or a pound or something to access this article. And probably, in the great scheme of things, if I was paying a subscription and accessing this newspaper, they'd probably calculate that this article's worth, fractions of pennies. I would overpay if there was a paywall option as well. And it would be so easy to add that paywall option in there. And there's this, I cross my fingers and I hope that the Financial Times, as a gimmick on the white paper day or something, they'll do that. They'll allow people to, have a pay-as-you-go paywall to access some of their articles using the Lightning Network, or even just the one article on, what is today? Okay, it's the white paper day, blah, blah. I think it'd be a really interesting gimmick. But yeah, for personal blogs and people running it, it's just needed to exist. And now it does exist and people can use it. And again, I'm sure people use it in really interesting ways. Not just, unlocking written content, because you could unlock all sorts of content with it.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing is people just don't know about some of these things, right? Because of course you and I and we in our, let's call it our Bitcoin and let's say Lightning bubble, we know about some of these things, but I think the average person doesn't actually understand, and maybe they haven't taken the time to actually try and pull these, the pieces exist. They just need to combine them and put them out there. And so even say Marty Bent, he's got, I know he's doing something with ghosts and having a way of paying for his newsletter. You can pay one off and get past the paywall. But the same kind of functionality exists in LNbits. And I think a lot of people just don't know that they could, let's say, run a Raspberry Blitz, install LNbits on it, do a paywall, and now get paid content on their website.
Yeah, so the LNbits extension is great, but that's you give someone a link, and then they hit a link, and they're like, okay, pay the invoice, and then it reroutes them to the thing which they're unlocking. But then there's nothing to stop them taking that thing and then sharing it with people as a way to kind of get around that paywall. It's very useful, and actually you can like paywall a paywall to have repeat payments and things. That was an idea from Tim from LNpay, because that was paywall. Paywall.co or something to begin with before it became LNpay. So it's paywalls are very, very, very powerful. I agree with you completely. And actually, I think that idea of not knowing where everything is getting worse, because like the boltz.exchange extension, which DNI is building, I had no idea this thing called boltz.exchange existed and how cool it was, and it existed for a while, and how slick and a finished product it looks like. And there's just so many Lightning projects, and people like, particularly if you're building stuff as well, or you're getting on, making things, you look up and there's all these projects you haven't heard of. And it's kind of like a few years ago, I don't know about you, but I could kind of keep tabs on what was happening everywhere. But now it's just, it's so tricky.
Yeah, but I mean, it's cool to see. It's cool to see there's so many uses.
It's a good problem to have, yeah.
Yeah, so I think listeners would want to hear, maybe just from you as one of the guys behind LNbits, if you could just outline some of the people who are using LNbits today already. So as you said, there's Lightning Tipbot, there's other projects, and people who are using LNbits in the background. So do you want to just spell that out for people?
Yeah, there's a bunch of people. I mean, it's anyone running one of our hardware projects like the POS or anything, they're using LNbits. But then also, we have single users, we have people just using it for themselves. Quite often, actually, I'll go to a conference and someone will be just used, because LNbits is an Insta wallet. You can just use it as a wallet in your browser, in your phone. You can actually install it as well if you're using Chrome. It's like a progressive web app, so it installs like an app. And then it's just like a phone app, But then, so a lot of people use that just as a wallet connected to their node when they're out and about spending funds. And that's really interesting to see for single users. But then there's other people who are running kind of custodian services for friends and family. I know a couple of people, like, they give their kids pocket money in sats, or they give a proportion of their kids pocket money in sats, and they just have like an LNbits wallet on their node. But then also, like, we have big power users using it as part of their stack. I know when all the stuff kicked off in El Salvador, the Guatemalan bank IBEX, they just used the point of sale extension as a entire business product. So they went to, hairdressers or a shop or whatever, and said, okay, you need to accept Bitcoin. Here's a point of sale. Use that. When you want the cash, come to us, we'll give you the cash. And they literally would just look at the wallet which that POS was connected to, and then they would just give them the cash and then just empty the funds out, delete the funds from the wallet. So yeah, you can use it. I mean, that was it kind of sucked at that time, because that was, I suppose, that was a year or so ago, and LNbits at that point we still had like a few critical bugs in the framework. So it would, like, if you used it, if it was a busy server, it would like trip over itself and then it wouldn't wake itself back up. So we had like a massive refactor, and we moved across to Fast API to kind of get around that from Quartz, and that was Fusion 44 did that. That was great. One of the Raspberry Blitz developers. So it kind of sucks at that. So with the Ibex guys, I mean, I spoke to them at the time. I was like, guys, you realize we're beta and like we have bugs. You're using it for a product for a bank. It scares me. And then they ended up developing their own solution, which is basically the same. Like, you can see the lineage in the POS. Ibex are a great company. I'm really excited about them, and I'm glad they're in that part of the world, and they're doing such a good job. Promoting Bitcoin in the right way, and Lightning in the right way. But I think now, if they were to use LNbits for that purpose, they would just stick to it, because why wouldn't they? Because it works great, flawless. It doesn't trip over itself. It's fast. It's so fast. So yeah, more and more people, as it's become stable. I mean, we're still beta, but I feel like we're on the road to coming out of beta now. Do use it as part of their stack. We have the Lightning tip, but I don't know if because we have the Lightning tip bot which uses it, and that's a real power user. Gives us a lot of good feedback on LNbits. So yeah, as part of your stack, as a custodial for friends, family, giving your kids pocket money, as a merchant for a shop. It's the classic problem with free and open source projects is you have no idea who's using your shit until someone sends you a picture and they're in, like, the deepest, darkest jungles of Peru, and they go into some cafe and somebody's using LNbits on their phone for a point of sale to accept Lightning. You're like, oh, okay, cool. And
Yeah.
well, there was an example like that. I think it was the Central African Republic. Actually, there was this nice little video of this guy selling something in his shop with Bitcoin, and he was using, I think he was using Lightning Tip Bot, the Telegram thing, which I just mentioned before, one of our power users. So like they were super excited about it, but then also using LNbits in the back end too. So it's, this is what it's the banking of the unbanked stuff, which we're interested in giving people good payments experience, aren't we? And giving as much access as possible. So if someone with limited resources can access the technology and it works, then it's like, okay, cool. Like that means most of the world can probably access this thing. So it's a range of users, and we get our issues, in our repo. We have people PRing. So it's like, so Ali just recently PR'd an invoicing extension, which is really cool, actually. Just makes an invoice link you can give to someone, and they can make payments and pay down their whatever the invoice is, and it keeps track of that. It's actually dead useful. But so he's obviously using it in some capacity where, or has some customer or something, he wants to use it in that capacity. So you kind of get an inkling of where people's interests are with the software. But yeah, you don't, I don't know, who knows who's using it.
People are out there and they're just using it for whatever, and they could even, I've seen, just from playing around, you can have it as a tip jar. You can use it to sell event tickets in your own sort of self-hosted way. Let's say you're a Bitcoin meetup organizer and you want to organize a barbecue, but you want to charge people, whatever, $30 to pay for the food and the drinks and whatever. You could sell your own little event tickets on that. I mean, there's all kinds of ways you can use it, whether it's hobbyist or community or even professional business people who are using it as part of their stack. So I encourage people to check it out. The website is lnbits.com. And of course, make sure you follow Ben. He's on Twitter. His handle is @ArcBTC, ARCBTC. So Ben, any final thoughts out there for listeners?
Yes, we also have, because when you get to that lnbits.com website, we also have a version of LNbits written in Go called Infinity. And that uses and handles extensions slightly differently. So I would advise people to Legend is the one which we're all working on to get out of beta. And then as soon as we do, we want to start using and playing around with the Go version. And I mean, it is being worked on actively and people are using it as part of their stack and things. But we just need to get the Legend, the Python version out of beta first and then make it fully usable for people. And then the Go version is also very interesting, the way because it makes developing extensions kind of really easy. So that's something we're very excited about. But so when you go there, check out the Legend version, and also, check out the Go version too, and also run it and play around with it. But that's the more experimental version. which we've been playing around with. So yeah, not really. If you want to check out the hardware stuff, I think we got a link. I think there's a repo for the hardware wallet, which we can use with the LNbits on-chain extension in the LNbits repo. But we should also probably link that in the on-chain extension itself, because we have a little about bit. And the point of sale, if that's ARC-BTC, if you Google that, GitHub, then you should be able to find my LNPOS, and then also my ATM, the Fossa, and other projects, Sweet Machines, and all the little gizmos and whatnots. And Bitcoin Switch, that's a nice project. Just, a very cheap little module. You can accept a payment, turn something on, make something, happen. Like whatever, like a vending machine. I got a vending machine project on there as well on ARC-BTC on GitHub. But yeah, check out LNbits, check out the hardware stuff. Come into the LNbits Telegram group, actually, t.me/LNbits. And then it's like a good film, a good story, sorry. They always say in like the film industry, a good story writes itself. That's kind of like LNbits. As soon as someone understands what it is, they're like, oh, we could do blah, blah, blah. And they come up with some great idea, and you're like, oh, yeah, great, because they've got, different life experiences, and they have their own, ideas. So it's always exciting when you have someone new come into the project. Even if they don't think themselves as being very technical or creative, you'll suddenly find that they start coming out with good ideas. And often, there's some ideas people have proposed just in the group, and then within a couple of weeks, someone's made it. Someone's like, oh, I made that thing off the back of someone else's idea. So you don't necessarily have to be a developer to contribute. But obviously, we always are looking for contributors. So please do, contribute if you can. And yeah, that's it, I think. Oh, fantastic. There's also a Telegram channel for the hardware stuff called MakerBits, t.me/MakerBits. And that's cool. We got some, a couple of electrical engineers fabricating POS boards, so they can come up with a more sort of industrial looking POS. I think a couple of the Bresco Map people are in there as well. Yeah, that's a nice group too to check out.
Excellent. Well, listeners, the links will be in the show notes. And Ben, thank you for joining me today.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Cheers.